So welcome to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Please be reminded that this is being broadcast live on the internet, and we'll begin with, if you'll silence your phones. Everybody on the podium, thank you. Agenda item 2 is consideration and approval of the minutes from the June 26, 2013 meeting.
Move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say no. Thank you. Item passes. Item 3 is the consideration of approval of the consent calendar. Dr. Tesher.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I move approval and addition of items 5A, 5G, 5H 1 through 5, 5H 7 through 9, 5H 11 and 12, as well as 5I 2, 1, 5, and 5J. All of those have finished their comment period, and there was no comment.
I'll let people look at those briefly. Say them one more time.
Okay. So all these are item 5. They will be A, G, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H7, H8, H9, H11, H12, I1, I2, I5, and then the ones that were already listed on the consent, which were B, C, D, E, F, J.
I'll second the motion.
Any questions? Yes.
Go ahead, Raymond.
Well, I just wondered, since some of the, I'm not sure how familiar board members are with any of these issues. I certainly understand there's no public comment that they're ripe candidates for being on the consent calendar, but I'm wondering if there are any questions about any of these issues that board members would like to be informed about. Because some of these issues, although it makes sense to put them on the consent calendar, there are some others that you probably might want to be familiar with.
I'd be happy to withdraw any of those that you think the staff should discuss with us, but I felt the materials prepared me adequately, and I felt that I understood them. That's why I was offering them.
Other discussion?
Actually, if we could have agenda item 5H2, we did receive a comment on that one, and I do have an additional change to propose on that set of rules.
So that would be H2?
Yes, 5H2. Oh, anything that had yellow supplemental materials in front of you, we did receive comments. So 5H7, 8, 9, 12, and 5I1 and 4.
Maybe we should leave them.
Okay, so do you want me to read back into the record the ones that were on the original consent and the ones that we're adding? So we have an updated list.
Let's do that.
I'll agree with Dr. Silverman that we should discuss anything that received comments or that staff has an alternative recommendation to it. Would you like me to read those back again? Okay. So they would be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H1, H3, H4, H5, H11, I2, I5, and J.
Okay.
Guess I need to second that motion.
Other comments? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. All right, so you can see then, if there are questions along the way, I've got the agenda, but I'm not sure I marked them clearly, so you will need, Stacy, if you'll help me.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Item 4, public testimony. We have received some comments. It is our decision maybe to hold the comments till the agenda item is on the table. So at that time, we'll call you to the front and identify those of you who are here for public comments. Let's see, item 5. 5A, and is now on the consent. 5B,
H2 is your first one.
just want to make sure. Consent, 5G, 5H, H1 is on consent. H2, consideration of board rules concerning dual credit requirements. Stacy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you may recall, these rules were adopted on an emergency basis and amend dual credit, specifically related to the number of courses a student may enroll in unless approved by the Commissioner the Commissioner of Education. This set of rules addresses, we did receive one comment, and specifically the request was made to add language to 4.85B2 and 4.85B3 to allow a student to use the English 2 writing or English 2 reading end of course exam to determine eligibility for academic and workforce dual credit. And staff agreed with that suggested change, and it's reflected in the supplemental materials. Additionally, there needs to be a change made on page 2 of your supplemental materials under 2A. The level 2 final phase-in should be changed to read level 2 final standard. Changing the word phase-in to standard aligns with the terminology used by Texas Education Agency. And in a meeting earlier this week, staff agreed that that would be a reasonable technical change to make. Finally, these rules provide clarification related to dual credit, participation, and funding. A college may only claim funding for students getting college credit in core curriculum, career and technical education, and foreign language dual credit courses. It also adds that this provision does not apply to early college, high school programs, and other similar programs as approved by the Commissioner of Education. Those are the only changes that were made.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, 3 is now on the consent calendar. 4, 5, 6, item VH7.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next 3 supplemental item materials are all related to the graduate medical education programs. We received a letter, a joint letter from all the medical schools with excellent comments, and we've made suggested changes accordingly to each of the programs. So the first one for item 5H7 reflects the preliminary for the planning grants. These are going to be grants awarded of $150,000 to entities that may be, and this is the way the suggested language was revised. An entity is, so you can see on the actual page, let's see, page 2. In section 6.108, the eligibility The suggested change is the following entities located in the state are eligible to apply for support under the Planning Grant Program. A hospital that is eligible for Medicare funding of GME and does not operate a GME program, or an entity that is partnered with or intends to partner with a hospital that does not operate a GME program and is eligible for Medicare funding of GME. These supplemental materials were shared with the various medical schools, and they are all comfortable with the changes that we've proposed.
Move approval. And a question, Stacy?
Yes.
Under 6.108, the eligibility, help me clarify. I thought that it was that specific GME program. They could actually have GME at the facility, but it would be a different specialty. So, for instance, if they had a family medicine program, they would be eligible for this if they were to start a general surgery program. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, it's actually for brand new entities that have not qualified for GME. So that those hospitals that are out there that are what's deemed the virgin hospitals. So that's what this funding is to support.
This funding would be for a hospital that has no GME
Correct.
of any type, even though we're asking them to start in a different one. So
Yes.
if they have any ongoing GME now, that would not be, they would be ineligible under this criteria.
That's correct.
Okay.
Stacy, are we having any interest?
Yes, and actually, pleasantly, on a positive note, we had a meeting, and the funding allows up to 12 entities to receive funding, and we actually had 12 interested parties, which I thought was wonderful. So hopefully, of those, hopefully they'll all apply, and hopefully they'll all qualify. But it is good to know that there is interest out there in the communities.
Great. Okay, agenda item 5H. Oh, you're right. Do I have a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't hear you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 8's on the consent. No, we're doing item 8. We have comments. Sorry, Stacy.
Thank you. Yes, these rules address the unfilled position grant program and incorporate the suggested revisions provided by the medical schools in their joint letter. A change related to eligibility provides clarification that a residency program and its sponsoring institution are eligible to participate in the program if the program has unfilled first-year residency positions that are approved by the program's accrediting body. And we agree with that and think that's a fine change. Also, just so you know, for your information, this RFA, the request for applications for this program is up and out. So we're hoping that we'll get that input from the institutions and the residency programs and get those positions filled very quickly. So.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would like to thank the institutions for providing comment, but especially for them providing a joint letter of comment, because it makes it much easier for us to understand that all of the institutions affected by this are in agreement of that. So I would like to state that appreciation for the previous as well as this item and their input from the medical schools.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the last of the 3 GME program rules that will be considered today. Again, specific clarifications have been made related to first-year residency position and eligibility. Those are the changes that are made that were reflected, again, in that joint letter. So that being said, I would like to say thank you to the medical schools publicly and to my staff, Suzanne Pickens, for creating these programs so quickly and being really thoughtful in their creation and establishment.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Okay, so 10 and 11 are on the consent. We go to 12.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we received several comments on these proposed rules, we have suggested we would recommend no changes at this time. I can review some of the comments that were made. Specifically, there was a request that the 90-day waiver or information that was required by an institution be lifted. It's a 90-day submission requirement be removed, and that is in statute, so we don't really have the authority to do that. Additionally, the immunization partnership stakeholders and a commenter from St. Mary's sought clarification on the best method for a student who's enrolling in a course for a short term, for example, going to summer school, how that student could show evidence that they've received the bacterial meningitis immunization. They could, in our response, we've said that we are fine with them showing a copy of their immunization record or their original record, or if they were submitting a request for a conscientious objector, that would be all right as well. So,
Madam Chairman, I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? I do have a question, Stacy. What's our compliance? Are we seeing 30% conscientious objectors, or
we do have data and information on that from the institutions. One of the nice things about this piece of legislation that was passed is that the Department of State Health Services is developing a portal for community college students so that while they're registering for classes, they can immediately get online and file such an objection at that point, if that's what they want to do. So they're trying to streamline their process. It's not in place yet, but they do hope to have it in place by January, which is when this legislation related to the bacterial meningitis goes into effect.
But we're not tracking what our compliance is as far as actual people getting the immunization.
Right. We were able to do that when we had the form here, but we're no longer able to do that since we don't have the form.
I see.
Now, once DSHS does that, we can get information from them, and I'm sure they'll be happy to share the information with us. But I can't get you the figures exactly what they were last time around.
Another comment and question, perhaps. Early, when this legislation was introduced, I heard a lot of community colleges that were just caught off guard. There were a lot of particularly small institutions located in small parts of the state that just didn't have access to the vaccine. It just wasn't available. We have not heard any complaints in the last 12 months. As far as the Community College Task Force. So I assume that these problems that were initially there have gone away, or we'd have probably heard something. Do y'all have a feel for that?
Well, we did. We were able to meet with the community colleges and Department of State Health Services and really work on making that arrangement happen so that they could have students have access to that portal, which I think was really their main concern. Just because students show up and want to register for class very quickly.
Yeah, and two, there was a concern about the cost, and I don't know whether that's been addressed. Again, we haven't heard any complaints on that,
Right.
But initially, there were some problems with regard to accessibility of the vaccine,
Absolutely.
as well as the cost of the vaccine. Does the agency have any feel for whether or not those issues have been addressed?
One approach has been made, which is to encourage students when they're in high school to get that immunization, which they can do at a much lower cost. And we're trying to work with I know the colleges have been working with their local high schools to make sure they get that message.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see, I believe we are on agenda item 5I1.
Thank you. The intent of the amendments to the rules is to incorporate into existing rules the replacement of the reference to recommended or advanced high school program with the distinguished level of achievement under the foundation high school program. Additionally, the reference to tax was also removed from section 4.159. One comment was received on this one. That language be added to, the right one? I think so. That language be added that students in an early high school may graduate under the recommended or advanced program until September 1 of 2020. Staff agreed with that comment and removed the reference to specific high school graduation plans in section 4.1535 and 4.1536.
Move approval.
Very not available.
Second.
Sorry.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see. Agenda item 5I2. No? I is on the consent?
I believe it's on consent.
Okay. 5I3.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn. 5I4.
Yep.
All right. Stacy.
Yes. All right. And for this, you do have another set of supplemental materials. These proposed rules incorporate legislation passed in Senate Bill 215, which requires that students not be required to complete more than the minimum number of hours required by SACS, which is 60 semester credit hours. There's allowance for a compelling academic reason, and staff drafted the proposed rule to mirror the 120-hour rule for bachelor's degree programs. The language related to compelling academic reason includes allowances for a justification of an associate's degree program consisting of more than 60 semester credit hours. As it is currently proposed, it reads, acceptable justifications are programmatic accreditation requirements, statutory requirements, and requirements for licensure, certification of graduates. However, many comments have been received, and that this is perhaps too restrictive. Therefore, staff propose an amendment to the language to read, acceptable justifications may include but are not limited to programmatic accreditation requirements, statutory requirements, and requirements for licensure and certification of graduates. This specific language should be incorporated as well into the rules that will come back to you in December and January related to academic associate degree programs, as well as the bachelor's programs of 120 semester credit hours. We'll also bring those back to you in December and January. And I do believe we have a couple of folks here to testify.
So I'd like to invite Sissy Matthews to the front there. Very good. Yes. And if you'll pull the microphone close to you and push the little red button so it's on.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Sissy Matthews, and I'm here as the president of the Texas Associations of College Technical Educators, or TACTE as we like to call ourselves. TACTE Board of Directors and its members did have great concern with the initial limiting definition of compelling academic reason. Right before this meeting, Dr. Silverman handed me the recommended changes. TACTE acknowledges the importance of creating streamlined programs that graduate students quickly and into the workforce. While many of the workforce programs can adequately train students for success within 60 hours, we believe that setting this arbitrary limit, regardless of the scope and complexity of the curriculum, could be very detrimental to our students and to our employers. TACTE's recommendation that we had sent in written comment was to add language about advisory committee input or industrial demand as being a specific criteria or an academic compelling reason, but we do recognize that this change in the language could also cover that also. So thank you for your time.
Any questions for Ms. Matthews? Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there one more speaker? I believe yes. Hang on. Lee Ogburn. Russell. There we go. Very good. Welcome.
Thank you for your time. I'm Lee Ogburn Russell. I'm from Temple College in Temple, and I represent health professions in Temple. First, I want to thank the coordinating board staff for listening to our concerns and making this change in the proposed rules. As some of you may be aware, most of the accrediting bodies and licensing bodies for health professions do not specify a number of credit hours. So those exceptions are really useless for the majority of the health professions. The accrediting bodies and the licensing bodies will specify content that must be included. They will include behaviors, competencies that must be included, sometimes even the number of procedures, but they will not specify credit hours with just a few exceptions. So we really do need additional rationale, additional ways to justify having programs be longer than 60 hours so that we may continue to provide Texas with health care providers that can safely practice on our citizens. So thank you, and thank you for the co-board's consideration. Certainly.
Thank you for coming and testifying. So I would agree with you that that is somewhat unique, and the question I would have is there an opportunity for other educators across the state in those disciplines to come up with what would be the appropriate maximum amount of hours and then make a recommendation so it's uniform across the state? Is that something that we could do or that would be helpful?
I do believe it would be helpful. Right now, if you look, most of the health profession programs in Texas are at the 72-hour cap, the current cap. There are some pilot programs that are being done by nursing, and just because there are more nursing programs than anybody else, are doing some pilots looking at shorter programs. And we are seeing some pilots going on across the nation. So I believe that in the future we may have some evidence that 66 hours could be adequate. At our college, we've looked at the the general ed requirements and maybe streamlining those. So I believe that we could streamline our programs, get a little bit shorter, possibly generalize and get more compatible across the state, because it does make it easier for our students to transfer, and as their lives indicate that they may need to transfer. So yes, I think we can do it. We just don't have in this short period of time the evidence to get there, and we certainly don't have evidence supporting the 60-hour cap, but we can look for a cap somewhere in the middle. Thank you.
So, Stacy, question: is there the timeline is next fall? Is that right?
Actually, it's the enrollment fall 2015.
15.
So we feel like we're getting out in front and we're giving the institutions plenty of time to go ahead and make those changes.
Is there an advisory committee currently that could handle?
We are happy to work with the different fields, and we're going to take a look at which programs are at that 72 semester credit hour and what looks like it could be reduced. So we will be working with the colleges, and already we're reaching out specifically to nursing. So we think we can make great strides there as well.
Comment?
I would move approval, and I'll have a comment.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second?
Yes, please. Second.
Discussion.
So I think that the language, I want to appreciate the staff because I think this allows the flexibility that they're going to need and essentially memorializes what is our practice, which is to offer an alternative pathway. I would say also that the advisory committees at each of the institutions are going to have a responsibility to pare down the unnecessary programs within these to try to get to the aspirational 60 hours. And certainly we're going to want to highlight the fact that those are mandatory. Each institution has an advisory committee which involves folks from the area in industry as well as others to say what is really necessary and what is not. There's a 15-hour core that's a requirement. That's something that we're going to continue to require. But what we need to do is to get the least number of hours that gets the graduate that is ready to be employed as possible. And so I think if we all work together along that line, it's my understanding that the policy would be that if there was an exception granted, it would be for a 5-year period, but still the advisory committees are meeting annually and reviewing these things so that they could limit their hours during that 5-year period, but not exceed that without coming back and asking for additional hours. Is that right, Dr. Silverman?
That is certainly a process that we'll be able to put in place. Absolutely.
And you and I think, had a conversation yesterday wanting to have parallel language with how we deal with the 120 hours in the baccalaureate. Is that something we would go back and amend that also?
Yes, and we plan to bring that back to you in December or January.
So the two would be mirror, one would be 60, one would be 120, but the process would be almost identical.
That's correct.
Great.
Other comments or questions? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see, is I-5 on the consent?
Sure it is.
Yep.
Okay. Any other? I know. All right, item 5J. Consent? No, 5K. Are you sure?
Madam Chairman,
No.
that's not, it's
I'm
not
sorry.
on consent.
There is no case.
Yes.
Yes, there's a supplemental paper at the very back of your
Yes.
document.
There is a case.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Madam Chairman, and I
Yes.
apologize for having to add the supplemental item, but after the agenda, of course, before it was posted, but after your agenda was sent to you, we did receive word from Texas Workforce Commission that we were being awarded some funds that they had applied for through the Department of Labor that focused on our Accelerate Texas program, which is a program that works to help give an individual basic skills and to help them get employed and get into the workforce. Because of the success with this model, Texas Workforce had the interest in helping identify institutions, those strong institutions that have these models, to help the individuals in the area who were unemployed. And so that's to take the displaced worker and to try to get them into these programs. And they were awarded the funds. It's $1 million. It will be coming to the coordinating board. It will be sent out we will enter into an agreement between the two agencies, and we'll be awarding funds to 4 institutions. The money will be only used and can only be used for the tuition and the program costs of the participants. So it's to identify displaced workers in these 4 regions that are in need, who want to work in critical shortage area employment. Texas Workforce will be carrying the load for monitoring these programs, the participants in these programs, as well as the reporting to the federal government. So the item before you is to allow us to accept those funds and to award them. There will be 4 institutions: Hill College, Amarillo, Tarrant County, and South Texas College. And the reason that these have been identified is because of the quality of their programs and the urgency for the displaced workers within that area. So it's like a joint effort, but they are the ones that applied for the funds and were awarded the funds, and we were notified of that award.
Judy, were those the only 4 that applied?
No, they looked at the colleges, and you had to look at the success of their programs and the high need area of unemployment in these critical shortage areas for workforce. So that's how they were targeted.
Okay,
And the
what were the
institutions-
programs again?
It's Hill College, Amarillo, Tarrant, and South Texas. These colleges were contacted after. They did not realize that they were being looked at because of the quality of their program, and they were in dialogue with Texas Workforce and ourselves and want to accept the money because they have workers out there who are displaced, who are trying to get into programs in order to be trained and get back into the workforce.
What are the careers again, the path, the professions?
Well, I'm not exactly sure
Okay.
because it depends on the regional area.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But there's it's for putting 200 people within each of these programs back out in the field. So it's a pretty good sized number of individuals. And the college had to be able to sustain that number of individuals within their programs.
Well, we never turn down money.
No, and these programs are good. This model is working, and the fact that Texas Workforce, and I think the commissioner might want to speak to this because he is the one that originally had the first dialogue with Commissioner Alcantara from Texas Workforce.
Well, I think this is one of the most exciting initiatives that we've participated in some time, and it's really catching fire across the state. The idea is that you have workers that are out of employment, and they have time on their hands. And one of the things you can do is intensify their training and give them the academic skills and the workforce skills to get a job that pays a living wage as soon as they finish the program. Instead of, for example, if there's a conventional certification program that takes 2 years, you might be able to condense it into 1 year, a 1 year program into 6 months. You get workers back in the workforce as quickly as possible. It benefits the state, obviously. It benefits the individuals and their families, and it also demonstrates the willingness of two-year institutions. We have programs of this type not only in community colleges but in technical colleges. It shows the willingness of institutions to redesign their programs, to do things differently to help people get back to work as quickly as possible. This program and this grant also demonstrates the increasing cooperation between the Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Texas Workforce Commission. You'll recall for the past couple of years we've been talking about aligning higher education and actual workforce needs and opportunities more closely. And this is an example of that.
We have been meeting on a regular basis with TWIC and Texas Workforce as we work to address our initiative of the Adult Basic Education Program. The addition to this is that Texas Workforce, the workforce boards, will be very involved with the institutions in the selection of these candidates, not only in the selection but in the monitoring and placement, so that they can have assurance that these individuals will be able to get jobs once they've completed the program. So as the commissioner says, it's begun to be a very good marriage and a very good relationship, and the fact that they singled out the work that we have done is, with the oversight of Dr. Linda Munoz as the individual who oversees our AB effort, is really a commendation to not only the agency but the work that's going on in the field by these institutions. It will also, if you notice in the blue page, it will also help us afterwards to begin to look at this scaling initiative, so to help other institutions who also want to create programs like this. And I also might add that in your blue page, the 4 institutions that I've referenced were not listed because this was done so quickly when we got the notification, but we have to enter into this agreement with Texas Workforce by the 30th of September because the contract has to get to the federal government. And so they had to move quickly to talk to institutions in order to ensure that they would accept these funds if we, as you the board, have accepted them and allowed us to move them through our agency.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question?
Judy, it's $1 million. Is it $250,000 per institution?
Yes, it's equally
and so,
divided.
So that's about 12, and it's roughly 200 people per institution that will be.
Well, it varies the number depending on the region. But it was my understanding when we first dialogued that it's about 200 people. So I don't know if it's
200 people total,
yes,
or 200 people per institution.
No, I don't quite know if it's 200 per institution. It depends on the region, and the money, even though they haven't told us yet, it's equal. Originally in the dialogue, that's what we had been told. They were going to equally divide it among institutions. So I've not had any more dialogue with them since they've talked to the institutions. But I can provide that information for you once we know how many they've selected. That was the original intent. That's where our concern was, because we didn't know if an institution could accept that many additional students. But they willingly said they could handle whatever load they were given.
This grant represents a shift in strategy among TEA, the Texas Workforce Commission, the Coordinating Board. Historically, what we've done in adult basic education in Texas is we've tried to get people a GED. Right. Then we've tried to put them in a community college program that could take from 1 to 2 years and get them in the workforce. Well, that model doesn't work for 25-year-old single mothers, who need to get a job as quickly as possible. So what we've done is we've shifted the focus to determining what level of academic skills of adult basic education do you need for a particular job. And whether it's a GED or whether it's something else, then you focus on providing the people in the program those set of academic skills combined with the workforce skills that they need to hold the job that they're training for and get them out and into the workforce as quickly as possible.
Commissioner, I don't think we do enough for ABE in this state, period.
We know that. We all know that.
And I think this may be a drop in a bucket, so to speak, but at least it's the first step. And I think, like you say, it's a change in strategy. Maybe more will come. And on that note, Madam Chairman, I move that we quickly accept those funds.
We have a
They are
motion.
emergency funds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you average it out at $8,000 a worker, let's just say in terms of the training, because that's what it has to go for. It has to pay the institution for the training of that individual. Then they could take quite a number of students within their programs.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Have a second? I do have a question. Does this pay their tuition or just for the program remodel?
No, it's paying for their tuition.
So
it's
it's
the
the
actual
whole
cost
package.
of training that individual.
That's great.
The money cannot be used for anything else. We can't access any of the money for administrative cost or anything because those are the guidelines by the
Right, so if they have
Department
to
of Labor.
remodel their program, that cost is on the school itself.
Well, and they don't have to remodel it. They've got the programs in place.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. Any more discussion, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you. Our next agenda item is adjournment.
I have one other. I apologize for doing
Okay.
this, but I just want to make sure that it's clear to the audience members that there were a few items that were on consent calendar that we're not taking up today because the comment period has not ended yet. And those specifically are items 5H6, 5H10, 5H3, and 5I3. I believe there's one more that I can't find.
Yes.
5H1. So there are four. 5H1, I'll go back over them. 1, 6, and 10, and 5I3. The comment period for those has not yet ended and will end on September 30th. So I just
those
wanted to provide that clarification.
Will those be brought to us at the board meeting?
Yes, they will come back to you all for the board meeting.
Any other comments? I have an item on the table.
So move.
Adjournment.
So move.
Need a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Yes,